Hey folks, so I saw a movie over the weekend. Sausage Party, actually, not any of the fun stuff that I thought I'd go see, but I had a friend in town. My friend Chad was in town. He said, let's go see Sausage Party. So me and my brother-in-law and my friend Chad went and saw Sausage Party. Thought I'd give you a review and analysis. This video will be broken into two parts. A general review, I suppose, without any of the spoilers, and then an analysis section where I sort of dig into the things that I think work and some of the things that I definitely think don't work about the movie. So let's start with the general stuff, okay? Let me give you the setup such as it is. Here's the setup, and I'll show this to you. There's a bunch of food, and they wait around for the gods, which are humans. They're sitting in the grocery store. They're waiting for the humans to take them out to the great beyond, where they could finally have sex with each other. That's the setup. Here's the twist that happens like 5 minutes into the movie. They become shocked to find out that the humans eat them rather than take care of them in an orgy-filled paradise. So there's your setup. It does have some novelty, but I felt like the novelty of that setup wore off fairly quickly. Is the movie funny? Yes, sort of. It has laughs. There are definitely laughs in it. I laughed more in the first couple minutes than I did in the rest of the movie combined. I felt like about half the jokes stuck and about half the jokes just landed flat. And there was a lot of cringe, especially when this bun character called Brenda, whenever she talked or did anything, it was very, very, very cringy. So about half the jokes were bad, half the jokes were okay. I felt that most of the humor was like potty mouth humor. That was funny because it was a bunch of talking sausages saying the F word over and over again and talking about sex, rather than humor that's derived from the plot. So there was an attempt to make humor sort of derived from the plot, but I felt on every occasion that really, for the most part, felt rather flat. There were definitely some things that I liked about it. Like I said, the first 15 minutes was fairly funny. There was a character that really stole the show for me, and that was Douche, and he is literally a douche. And he acts like a douche bro. He's like, bro, what's up, bro? And for me, he was definitely the best part of the movie, and I found myself really laughing and liking that character. The others were all either boring or just sort of ignorant and not in a way that to me was funny. It just didn't come off as funny. And I'll talk more about that when I dig into the story of this. The production overall was very okay. It looked okay. They had some very vibrant colors. There was this subtle thing where you had vibrant colors when the food were talking to each other, and when you were looking at it from the human's perspective, everything was a little muted, and that was kind of cool. The animation sometimes seemed to have this like low frame rate. They gave it like a claymation sort of look to it in a way that I don't know if that worked or not. It looked okay. The music was very, very okay. The plot was extremely predictable. Once you get the setup, oh, food has feelings, and they have this religious belief in this great beyond where humans will take care of them. You pretty much know the setup for the entire plot, and there's not really any twists in the plot. The plot just kind of falls forward through its motions all the way to the end. Right away in the first 5 minutes, you have this mustard that's returned to the store, and he's seen that the humans actually eat the food, and he tries to tell them, and they don't want to believe him because they have this religion that says that they're going to go to the afterlife, and then just things happen along those lines until at the end you can pretty much guess what happens to resolve the plot, and I'll talk more about that in the analysis section. So the plot's really, really predictable. You're not going to be guessing at the plot, but you're probably not really watching this for the plot, and like I said, most of the humor doesn't really derive from the plot at all. The plot's just there to kind of sort of hang these jokes on, and about half of them fall flat. So my overall conclusion, if you're going to go see this movie, I would probably say rent it. I don't think it's really worth seeing in the theaters. I saw it in the theaters, so you don't have to. There is some funniness to it. It's not all just like not good. Compared to This Is the End, another movie by the same sort of crew, Seth Rogan, who plays this sausage character in Company. This Is the End is much funnier, I think, than this movie. This movie, I think, just doesn't work as well. It felt like, and this is like the headline, it felt like about half of a South Park episode is what I'd say. So think of the South Park episode with the fleas living on the people, and how that was basically like one episode and not even like a whole episode. There was other stuff happening. It's like that. So the idea of food, thinking that the people are gods and are actually getting eaten, that's, to me, it felt like a very small idea that was stretched way, way out to make a full-length movie. So it felt like the idea just wasn't big enough to make a whole movie out of. With that, let me transition into a little bit more of the analysis stuff that I've been doing lately. So I'm going to talk about setting, characters, plot, the three big things that make a story work, and I'm going to talk about all those things. So the first thing, the setting, is this grocery store as an epic landscape. They're journeying through the grocery store on this epic quest to sort of find the truth about whether or not the humans will eat them. And I should mention from this point on, there's going to be plot spoilers. Not that there's much plot to spoil, but if you care about that, you can turn this off, listen to what I said before, and apply that consumer knowledge. Otherwise, I'm going to talk about all the details. So they have this grocery store landscape. They're going on this quest to figure out, first of all, they get knocked out of their cart, and so they're lost in this giant grocery store where they don't know where they are, and they go through all the different aisles, and each aisle is like a little different country, full of ethnic food and that sort of stuff, and the food acts like the stereotype of that ethnicity, which, by the way, I actually didn't think was very funny. I didn't find it offensive. I just didn't think it was funny by itself. I don't know. It just, sometimes racial humor works, and sometimes I feel like it just falls flat on its face. In this case, I just didn't feel like it worked. And eventually the hot dog finds, in the sort of carvery section with the knives, the hot dog finds the cookbook that confirms what Mustard told him and what some other interesting characters told him, that people actually eat the food from the store. They do not treasure it like a god treasures his children. Rather, they devour it for sustenance. That's the setting. It's pretty basic. The look of the animation, as you can guess from looking at this frame, is rather simple and rather straightforward. So there's not that much to really say about the setting. I think it's kind of a fun idea. Food journeying through, like, if you're this tall, a grocery store is going to seem like this incredibly fantastic landscape. So I guess that works okay, and I think the setup works okay. But like I said, I think it was stretched too much story. Next, let's talk about characters. So let me give you a rundown of all the characters. There's Frank, which is this character, played by Seth Rogan. He is a sausage, and his primary motivation is to have sex. Later, he wants to know the truth, but he still wants to have sex, and he wants to have sex with Brenda, this bun, and her primary motivation is to have sex. She wants to have sex with Frank, and they feel like they can't do it till they get to the hereafter. When they get to heaven, they can finally have sex. Next, we have Bagel and Lavash. This is, let me see, with Sammy Bagel Jr., and Kareem Abdul-Lavash, who are basically there to represent a Jew and a Muslim who don't like each other, and all they want to do is get home. They don't really care about having sex. So they're not motivations. They're like adult characters. Other characters not seen on the screen. There is Carl the Sausage, whose primary motivation is to have sex. There is Barry the Sausage, who's this little deformed guy, and his primary motivation is to have sex. And he worries that he's not going to get to have sex because he's deformed. And deformed dudes are not wanted by the lady buns to have sex with. There is Douche, who is not pictured here, and his primary motivation is to be a douche, to go inside a vagina and to do his douche thing. Right? Then you have Taco, who is not shown here. Taco wants to have lesbian sex. You have a bunch of other buns who all want to have sex. That's their motivation. So if you're seeing a bit of a pattern here, the motivation for the entire cast, other than these two guys, right here, is to have sex. That's the first thing that they talk about in the movie, and that's everything that drives their belief in the hereafter. So when we get to the hereafter, we finally get to have sex, basically. And food sex to them is like obviously the hot dog going in the hot dog bun. And it's very funny. And I should also say that Brenda, whenever she talks, her mouth does look like something in particular that you should be able to guess from looking at this frame. And yes, it's very, very obvious what they mean by it. Okay, those are all the characters. Most of the characters are about as deep as a puddle, including Frank. Frank's motivation is is basically worthless, and these guys don't really have any other motivation other than we want things to go back to where they were. We want to go back on the shelf where humans can pick us up and take us to the hereafter. Only after Frank hears Mustard say that the people are going to eat them before committing suicide does he become curious and have some other motivation beyond that. But all their motivations, and then I'll talk more about this when I get into plot, all their motivations just kind of crumble and become meaningless when you get to the conclusion of the story, which is where they kill the gods and then proceed to have a giant orgy, thus fulfilling all of their actual motivation. So I guess it works in that sense. But the characters don't really have a lot of depth. Not that they have to. It's a comedy. And so it is kind of funny that everyone just wants to have sex and then gives into their hedonistic desires later on. So yeah, once the plot resolves, they just descend into this nihilistic, hedonistic orgy. It's a very sort of shallow way of having these characters live and exist. I want to talk about these two guys, Lavash and Sammy Bagel Jr., because they represent, quote, a Muslim, and the reason that I know he represents a Muslim, besides the fact that he talks with a Middle Eastern accent and looks like some dude from the Middle East, and the fact that he's a lavash, which is a Middle Eastern type of bread, is that he keeps talking about how he's going to dip his flaps into 72 bottles of virgin olive oil, which is funny the first time you hear it. Then they say it 100 more times, and it's not as funny. And Sammy Bagel Jr. talks like Woody Allen, so your stereotypical Jewish New Yorker. And of course, they don't get along because, right, Jews and Arabs don't get along, and they both got muscled out of their space on their aisle. So this is clearly representative of the Palestinian Jewish conflict. The only problem is, this guy's a Palestinian. Lavash is actually an Armenian bread. It's not Palestinian. So I don't really, it's just one of those things that if you think deep, it's a little bit annoying that they would do that. And then, of course, Sammy Davis, they get together. They decide that they don't have that many differences because they both like hummus. That's when they're like, oh, it turns out we're rather similar. Which, to me, I don't find it offensive. None of the stuff I find offensive. I just find it stupid. It's that's a really stupid way of trying to represent the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. That it's if they just realized how similar they were, they wouldn't be bombing each other. Rather than believing what I think is true, which is that you have two different peoples with very different value systems competing for a very small part of land. So I think it just, I could see someone from either one of these particular ethnicities being quite offended by it. I'm not offended by it. I just think it's kind of dumb. The person who wrote it makes me think that they don't know anything. That they're too stupid to understand why that conflict exists. So there's these characters, and of course there's some other ethnic characters, right? There's your Native American Firewater, and there's Mr. Grits, who's just a black stereotype, the worst kind of black stereotype. Not only is he dressed like a black guy from the 40s, he talks with that particular kind of slang, and they have him rape a box of crackers at the end, and I'm being very, very serious about the word rape. It is not consensual. He forces himself into a box of crackers. He rapes a box of crackers, thus showing how much respect the filmmakers had for for whoever was playing Mr. Grits. And I know it's a famous actor, but I don't remember his name off the top of my head. I think he's the guy from Hot Tub Time Machine, so think that's who it is. But anyway, I don't really find this offensive. Social justice warriors, I think, would just be like frothing at the mouth with these racial stereotypes. Of course, you have the Twinkies, the white guy, and no one really cares about that. But it's not that I find them offensive. It's just I find them stupid. They aren't funny to me because they don't represent absurdity to me anymore, and they're not presented in a really absurd way. They just, I don't know, it just didn't work for me. So those characters just didn't work for me. So yeah, the racial humor I felt fell very, very flat. Next, let's talk a little bit about plot. So I mentioned the setup. The plot is extremely simple, and the plot basically runs itself. And it's just like, rather than the plot being the main focus, it's really like kind of like a Christmas tree, and you're just hanging ornaments called jokes on it. And some of the jokes land, some of the jokes don't. I think overall about half the jokes land, which to me means if this were on Netflix, I think it'd be worth watching. If it were in the theater, I don't really think this is worth watching. And I did mention with characters, the character Douche. He's very funny because he's kind of like a caricature of, I don't know, like me in my 20s or something. Like, he's just a douchey bro, and he's like, he acts like he's drunk all the time, calls everyone bro, and like me and my brother-in-law, we call each other bro all the time, and we did it ironically for a long time, and then we realized that's just something that we say. It's kind of like, oh, I think we are bros now. I think we are dude bros. But he's like an angry bro. He drinks juice from a juice box, like out of its crotch, which is funny, and then of course gets pumped up like he's on steroids. He gets juiced, and that, I don't know. Anything that Douche was doing, I thought generally was kind of funny, whereas the other ones were not, just not quite as funny. And the human characters, they're basically bland. There's nothing really to say about the human characters. So moving on to the plot. I said the plot runs itself. That's the setup. The sausage and the bun are hoping to go home together with a human god, where they can have sex. When the mustard reveals that it's all a sham and kills himself, thus spilling all the food all over the floor, and they now have to escape from the shop clerk, who's going to sweep them up, throw them in the trash, and try to find their way back to their shelves so that they can get taken home. That's the setup for the plot. So they go on a little odyssey through some different aisles, which each one represents like a little bit different ethnicity. There's the liquor aisle where everyone's partying. There's the Mexican aisle where everyone is a Mexican stereotype, including like all of them are drunk. And the taco speaks with a very pronounced Mexican accent and wants to have lesbian sex with the hot dog bun for some reason. But that's the line that they pursue with that. And one of the sausages, one of the characters leaves with the god and almost gets killed by the god, and they have this big revelation that they all get eaten. Now, the audience was already in on this when this happens. They all get opened up from their package, and she starts like cutting up the hot dogs and eating the baby carrots and stuff. And the audience already knew that this happened, but to the characters, it's a big reveal. And I think that scene is rather humorous. However, and in terms of plot, it kind of falls flat because the audience is inherently in on the setup. They know that food is eaten. It's not like Soylent Green or something like that, where there's like this reveal that the food is eaten. We already know it, and then we just kind of see that now this character knows it, but we already know that the other characters figured it out too. Frank's already figured it out. Whereas this little deformed sausage, he's about to get eaten and chopped up here. He finally figures it out. He goes on an odyssey through the city as a piece of food, and ends up in this shopping bag of this drug addict who shoots himself up with bath salts, and then he can see that the food is alive, right? Which is, to me, was a kind of a funny thing to be derived out of plot. That once he gets on drugs, he sees the food that's talking, and the food talking is like real. But of course, he's gonna think it's a hallucination. And then later on in the third act, in order to propel the third act, so the second act is spent mostly by Frank, this guy wandering around, getting to the butchery aisle and discovering a cookbook which shows all the ways that the food is eaten by people. He tries to present this to the other food, and they reject him for it. They say, "How dare you like insult our beliefs about the great hereafter?" And that's pretty much like a shutdown of his whole mission, right? Then you have the Save the Cat, Dark Night of the Soul, where he's like, what am I going to do? I lost Brenda. Brenda rejected me because I had to pursue this truth. It's a pretty standard like screenplay setup, and I saw it coming within like the first 5 frames of the movie. And I should also say, I'll drop this in, I never saw a preview for this movie. I had no idea what to expect going into the movie. I just knew my friend wanted to watch it. So just a by the way there. So there's a dark side of the null. That's resolved when this guy drops out of the vent with the head of the drug addict that has picked him up off the street, revealing that the gods, humans, can be killed. Of course, we already knew that because we're humans. And so that propels the last bit of action where they decide to rebel against the humans and kill them. And they do that by dipping toothpicks into bath salts and shooting the toothpicks like arrows into the people to get them high so that they can see that the food is alive, but then but that's completely negated by the fact that the food then tries to kill the people. So the people are trying to kill the food, and the food's trying to kill the people. And that last bit of action in the movie is completely and totally unbelievable. And I know I'm saying this in a movie about talking food, that talking food is not believable, but it's not believable from their perspective. And if you've ever tried to organize people, like, it's one of these things where at the end they concoct this incredibly complex plan on the fly. You know, there's a part where like there's like a shopping cart being shot around with like rockets or something, and you hear them say like, now, and then like up come these little barriers to make the shopping cart go in this curve. All the fruit lifts up these barriers to send the shopping cart up this ramp, up through the windows where it explodes and kills the villains. One of the villains is Douche. The other villain is one of the shop clerks. And you're at that moment like, that's so stupid. Because if you've ever tried to get like 10 people to do the same thing on the fly, it doesn't happen. And it's pretty hard. Like, you're not going to get 100 people to all come up and execute a plan on the fly unless they're all like extremely well-trained soldiers. You're having them do something that's within their expertise, and you're an excellent battlefield commander. And none of those things happen. There's just a bunch of food that mere seconds before didn't believe that the gods were evil or that they would harm them. But somehow this sausage says, okay, guys, I respect your beliefs. And they're like, that's cool. We understand now, and we believe you. And then they make the humans turn on the food by making them see the food. I don't quite understand their motivation for getting the humans high. But when the humans get high, they start attacking the food, which then the food realizes it has to defend itself, and it kills the humans. So what happens at the end of that? Well, they kill all the people. They murder all the people in self-defense because they're food. And what do they do? What do they do as a result of that? Well, go back to their motivations. All the characters, their motivation is to have sex. Well, they all start having sex. All the food starts to have sex with each other in this massive food orgy, which I actually found quite funny just because it looked funny. Of course, it's really gross and it's very graphic. And this is also the point in the movie where after this incredibly graphic sex scene happened, the funniest part of the movie, which had nothing to do with the movie, happened, which is me and my friend Chad look over and we see a family walking out. You know, there's like those exits at the front of the movie theater. They walk out the exit and the sunlight comes in, and I see it's a couple with like a 5-year-old child watching this movie. This is a rated R movie, folks. This is not a movie for children. Okay, it's not a movie for children. And they took their 5-year-old daughter all the way through it and through the sex scene, but it was the scene after the sex scene that broke the camel's back, and they had to take their 5-year-old daughter. I mean, she looked 5. She looked really little. Not old enough to understand or appreciate or be able to handle a movie that's graphic to this level. They finally took her out of the theater. So they have this giant, anyway, they have this giant nihilistic food orgy, and Bagel and Lavash here decide that not only are they friends, they're going to have extreme gay sex with each other. To make the whole, like, let's insult the Jews and the Muslims thing really, really hammer home, they have them have gay sex with each other. And I don't know what to say about it. I thought it felt kind of flat, although some of the jokes in it were kind of funny. After that, then they have a quote, a reveal that they're really cartoons being manipulated by people, and of course that's not a reveal to us because we know they're cartoons. It's a reveal to them. That's the scene where they took the 5-year-old girl out of the theater, and probably the funniest part of the movie, which had nothing to do with the movie for me. So that's the whole plot. Now, I do have to talk about a couple of the themes in the plot, and I've talked about these already. The first one, and really the one that we should talk most about, is religion. This is a movie that presents a strongly atheist perspective. Everyone has this belief that the gods will take them to like the great, the great hereafter, or the great beyond is what they call it, the great beyond. So they're going to take them to the great beyond where they're going to experience paradise, which is obviously, intended to represent religion. However, I think the entire atheist perspective, and I don't take the atheist perspective too seriously because I don't think they take it that seriously in here, but we got to talk about it because they did do it, and if you do it, that means, well, you can be criticized for it. I think it really falls flat on its face in that final act, where the result of overcoming the gods and acknowledging that the gods are evil and then overthrowing the gods is that they then become hedonists and nihilists, which is one of the strongest criticisms of atheism, and it's one of the big fears of Nietzsche, was that people become nihilistic and would no longer care about anything. And that's exactly what happens. They stop caring about the future. They stop caring about each other. They rape. They literally rape each other. There's Mr. Grit's raping a box of crackers. They have all kinds of debauched behavior with one another, what they would consider debauched behavior, because with the perspective of the gods, you could only have sex through the gods, and once the gods are removed, now you can freely have as much crazy sex as you want. You can have gay sex, you can have orgies, you can have whatever kind of sex you want. It's now all on the table. And I think that just really undercuts any kind of message that Seth Rogan might have had about believing things of faith without evidence or anything like that. So it doesn't really do a good job of representing that perspective. Likewise, I don't think it represents religion very well or religious people. It's just religious people believe nonsense. They don't have any reason to believe it. The Firewater here reveals that he made up this song at the beginning of the movie that tells people that there's a great beyond and all this kind of stuff. So there's all these revelations that it's all made up and this kind of stuff, which isn't really representative of how most people interact with their religions or how they view it. And also the gods in this are actual physical people that they can see and touch. It's not like they're believing a different motivation for the gods rather than not believing in the gods themselves, which I think has a little bit different, thing about it. So I don't think it does a great job representing its perspective. But if you go see it, or if you see it on, if you wait and watch it on video or Netflix, which is what I actually recommend, don't take that too seriously. Don't let that get to you, because I don't think the movie takes it too seriously, or they wouldn't have done the things they did with him. I think if you're an SJW, if you lean that way, or you're easily offended by racial humor, you're not going to like this. If you're entertained by racial humor, you're probably not going to like the racial humor either. I think it mostly fell flat on its face. Overall, I think the movie, I would recommend it if you can watch it on Netflix or very cheap video or something like that. It is not, in my opinion, worth a trip to the theater, nor are you likely to gain anything from the experience of the theater. I think the plot is not very good. Some of the jokes are good, and that's what makes it worth watching. It's not as good as This Is the End. However, it has enough laughs that I would watch it on video. I don't know if I would watch it again. My brother-in-law said that it seemed like stoner humor, so I don't know if that appeals to you. To me, I could see that, mainly in that I think if you're writing these sorts of things and creating these sorts of things when you're inebriated, you're going to think they're funnier than they are, because you think everything's funnier than it is when you're high on cannabis. So maybe there's some truth to that. Like I said, not all the jokes really stuck, but overall, it's kind of funny. Maybe give it a go once it goes to Netflix or once it goes to the video. And let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. I'm always happy to see your perspective. I'm always happy to hear what you think about it. I think it's a pretty mediocre movie, even for a comedy. And I think it does a bad job with its themes. However, it's probably enough laughs to garner a watch at some point. So thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day. All my relevant links are down below, including my book, Muramasa Blood Drinker. The new book, I got a new book. It is out. You could pre-order it. It's coming out on September 21st. It's called Prophet of the Godseed. You can actually watch, my website's linked down below, and you can actually read most of what is in that book on the website. That will not be there forever, but pre-order it. It's 99 cents. You help the channel out. That's a great way to support me, and I hope you've gotten some value out of this presentation. Y'all have a great day. I'll be back later.